In section 5, we talked about hyperbolas. So you have hyperbolas centered at the origin, and if their transverse axis or their major axis is the x-axis, it's x squared over a squared minus y squared over b squared equals 1, and their asymptotes are y equals plus or minus b over ax. If the transverse or the major axis is the y-axis, then it's y squared over a squared minus x squared over b squared equals 1, and the asymptotes are y equals plus or minus a over bx. There are two differences, for an equation of a hyperbola not centered at the origin. In the transverse axis being the x-axis, it becomes x minus h squared and y minus k squared in your numerator. And your asymptotes now need to be shifted so they start at wherever your center is. So y minus k equals plus or minus b over a x minus h. And when your transverse axis is the y-axis, y minus k squared and x minus h squared in the numerator, and your asymptotes are y minus k equals plus or minus a over b x minus h. The center is at hk. A is the distance from your center to your vertices. C is the distance from your center to your foci. And then we use the equation b squared equals c squared minus a squared, which, depending on the information we're given initially, we can either be used to find b to write our asymptotes or to find c, which are our foci. So in our example, we have y squared over 16 minus x squared over 4 equals 1. And we want to identify our center, vertices, foci, and the equations of our asymptotes. So first I'm going to identify my center, which is going to be at 0, 0, since I'm not adding or subtracting anything from x or y in my numerator. Then for the vertices, so with an ellipse, a squared is always first, and a is always where your vertices are going to be. So a is going to be 4, and whichever variable is with is the variable you add and subtract to find your vertices. So my vertices are going to be at 0, 4, and 0, negative 4, since y is first. For the foci, now we're going to do our asymptotes. So I need to know A and B. So I've already identified that A is 4, and then B is going to be 2. So I do my asymptotes, it's going to be y equals plus or minus, and then because y is first, it's going to be A over B. So we're going to have 4 over 2x, which can simplify and gives us y equals plus or minus 2x. And now we're going to do our foci. So now I'm going to use the equation b squared equals c squared minus a squared. So we're going to have 4 equals c squared minus 16. Add 16 to both sides. We get 20 equals c squared. Take the square root of both sides. And then we get that c is about 4.5. So your foci are also along your major axis, so wherever your vertices are, so that would be y. So our foci are going to be at 0, 4.5 and 0, negative 4.5. Next example, we are going to again identify our center, vertices, foci, and equations of our asymptotes, and then we're going to sketch the graph. So we have x minus 4 squared over 25 minus y plus 1 squared over 1 equals 1. So for the center, opposite of what's with x, so positive 4, opposite of what's with y, negative 1. For the vertices, a is going to be 5, and because the variable that comes first is x, I'm going to be adding and subtracting that from the x value of my vertex, so I'm going to get 9, negative 1, and negative 1, negative 1. For the foci, we'll use the fact that b squared, so 1 equals c squared minus a squared, which is 25. Add 25 to both sides. We get 26 equals c squared. take the square root of both sides, and the square root of 26 gives us that C is about 5.1, which again, you add and subtract from your x coordinate, so we get 9.1 comma negative 1, and then we'll get negative 1.1 comma negative 1. And now for our asymptotes. So we're going to have y plus 1, since we're no longer at the origin, equals plus or minus, and then we have to put b over a in this case, so 1 over 5, and then it'll be x minus 4. And 1 over 5 doesn't simplify, so it's going to stay 1 over 5. Now we're going to use our vertices and our asymptotes and our center to graph our equation. So I'm going to start with the center, which is at 4, negative 1. Then our vertices, which are going to be at 9, negative 1, and negative 1, negative 1. So vertices, center. Now we're going to apply our asymptotes. So we're going to start at our center, and our slope of our asymptotes is 1/5. So we're going to go up 1 over 5, and then down 1, left 5. So that's one asymptote. Then we'll go up 1, left 5. And down 1, right 5 to get our other asymptote. And then our hyperbola is opening left and right, and it's going to be a very, very skinny hyperbola since our asymptote slope is so small. So very, very tiny hyperbola that we're going to graph. So for our last example, we want to write the equation of the hyperbola with a center at 5, 1, and it should say focus at 5, 7, and a vertex at 5, 5. And then we're going to state our asymptotes, and we're going to also graph our hyperbola. So I'm going to start with my center, so 5, 1. And then I have a focus at 5, 7. And I have a vertex at 5, 5. So wherever your vertex is in relation to your center tells you which axis is your major axis. So because my vertex is above my center, my major axis is the y-axis, which means I'm going to be using the equation y minus k squared over a squared minus x minus h squared over b squared equals 1. And I already have a and c, so the only thing left to do in order to graph it is to find b. And then that way I can also write the equation. So a is the distance from our center to our vertex, which is going to be 4. C is the distance from our center to our foci, which is going to be 6. So then we use b squared equals c squared, so 6 squared minus a squared, which is 4 squared. So we get 36 minus 16, which tells us b squared is 20. So for my equation, that's all I need. I need to know that b squared is 20. So now I write my equation. I'll have y minus 1 squared over, and then 4 squared is 16, minus x minus 5 squared over b squared, which is 20, equals 1. So that's my equation. In order to graph it, I need to know the equation of my asymptotes, which means I do need to go ahead and find b, which is going to be the square root of 20, which is about 4.5. So for my asymptotes, we'll have y minus 1 equals plus or minus, and then because y is first, we'll do a over b, so 4 over 4.5, and then x minus 5 squared. Which, if I'm going to simplify 4 over 4.5, is y minus 1 equals plus or minus 0.9 x minus 5 squared. So I'm going to do rough sketch of my asymptotes here just because it's not a nice slope. So I'm going to start by graphing my other vertex. So my other vertex is going to be down 4 from my center. And then I'm going to roughly sketch my asymptotes. Again, this is just a rough sketch. And then I can construct my hyperbola.